Gemini Notebook is one of the most powerful tools out there, and yet most people just have never even heard of it. So in this video, I want to show you how you can really harness Gemini and add some really interesting constraints and get outputs that are otherwise not really possible. So there is a lot to really like about this. For example, if you have a bunch of textbooks, you can upload all of them and you can ask very specific questions and it won't be hallucinating from other sources. It pulls only from the sources you give it. You can give it sources from the internet, PDFs, links to videos, all types of things. I'll show you how to do that later in the video. And then the outputs, not only can you ask it questions from the sources, but you can also create things like an audio overview. It can basically make a podcast that you can listen to while you're driving and learn about things. You can make flashcards, you can make quizzes, you can make slide decks and infographics, making this an incredibly powerful tool, not just for students and learning, but also anybody who has questions about an insurance policy, or you're trying to make a big investment, you really want to research something, but you don't want AI to hallucinate. And that is exactly where Gemini Notebook comes in. Formerly, this was known as Notebook LM. And of course, this is using Google's own AI, Gemini, one of the most powerful LLMs out there. And so I think that's a pretty solid intro there. There's a lot to talk about here. Let's dig through Notebook LM. So starting off with, how do you access it? I'll put a link in the description, but it's free to use as long as you have a Google account. So you can go to notebook.google.com and that will bring you to Gemini Notebook. This is also now rolling out on many Android devices, and so you can use this in many different places, making it really versatile. From here, you'll see we've got a couple tabs across the top. You can see all your notebooks. You can see just my notebooks. That's mostly what I do there. You have featured notebooks, so Google has some. I would really view these more as like inspiration, but if you want to, you can look at, visiting Yellowstone or, biology, Ben Franklin. You can dig into any of these, and there's already sources. It's kind of pre-curated. Like I said, I feel like this is more useful just for inspiration on how you can use Gemini Notebook. And then we have collections, and collections are basically like a folder in which you can put multiple notebooks. So I've got a couple related to YouTube. I put them in one collection. Now, with each notebook, let's create a new notebook. And the first example you'll see when I create a notebook, it asks for sources because this is not going to be using any other information outside of the sources you give it. You can either ask it to search the web for sources. You can also use sources from Google Drive if you already have files uploaded. They could be spreadsheets, they could be documents, PDFs, really a wide variety. This is able to interpret many different kinds of sources. So for this one, let's do an internet-based one here. I'm going to say I want to know more about sloths in Costa Rica. And I can either do a fast research or an in-depth research. And this is basically just a Google search finding sources that I might want to use. Now, I promise our next example is even more interesting, but I just want to give you the layout of the land here. So when it does this little research, you can either import all of these and just click import, or you can view them and you'll see it found, I think, 7 right there. And I can either select them all or I could deselect some. So I could go through and see, all right, this one is from, I believe, the Sloth Institute. You can open it up and see, or slothconservation.org. That looks like a good source. If you find something from like Reddit, maybe you're like, all right, that's good for certain things. Maybe you don't want it. Let's say I don't want this one right here. I can deselect that. I can say import. And now everything I ask it is purely coming from those sources. It's also going to name the notebook automatically, or I could name it myself. So there, it kind of named it based on the 1 or 2 of the sources. So like controversy, whatever. I'm just going to say sloths. And you see it's got a little emoji there, and it gives me like a little explanation at the top. Now, that's how you can import sources from the internet. I think most of what Gemini Notebook is really useful for is actually importing your own sources. So let's make another notebook. By clicking on the Gemini Notebook logo on the top, it brings you back to your little home page here, your landing page, where you can make new notebooks. In the new one, let's say I'm traveling abroad and I maybe have like a credit card, an American Express credit card, and I want to know, does that have insurance for my rental cars? Okay, so I have my 2 sources uploaded. If we ever want to not use one or the other source, you can deselect them and you'll be able to work within just one of your sources. So now I'm going to ask a simple question. I'm going to say, I am traveling. Am I insured with this credit card? Something that a lot of people kind of wonder when they're traveling. So you'll see it gives me an answer and very deliberately cites its sources. So right here, it mentions premium car rental protection. If I hover over the number 2 here, it tells me where it's actually getting that from. It's showing me quotes from the source, and I can view the source. So I could say view source. But also maybe I have another question that isn't in one of those sources. I could say, what is car rental loss and damage insurance? And as you can see, that's not within my sources. It doesn't really tell me what it is, but it just kind of gives the best information it can. So maybe what I want to do is find out what that is. I can go over here and start searching the web for other related sources that can explain these more peripheral things. So that shows you that you really do put essentially some really strong constraints on what Gemini is doing. I think that's really valuable. But again, over here, I could view my sources. I could just import all of them, and then I can try asking that question again. Now, with every output that you get, you can save notes, and you'll see over on the right side, the notes will be right there. So if you're working through a really long project, if maybe, for example, you're studying a textbook, anytime you see something like, oh, I really need to practice that and remember that, you can save those as notes and they'll show up on the right side. So for this right here, I'll just show you how Save Note works. If I click on Save Note, it'll generate the note over here. And if I ever click on that, it opens up what that little response was right there. I could also convert that to a source if I wanted to. That doesn't really make sense in this situation, but let me close that and continue scrolling down. So now that we have these new sources in here, let's try asking that question again. And it tells me right on the bottom, there are 12 sources. So now there's 12 sources, and it's going to be digging through all of that. I think you guys get the idea of how this is working in this example. It should help you to really dig through, like, policies and insurance stuff and legal things. And obviously it's not a replacement for a legal advisor, but it's a good way to kind of dig through really big documents and find things you're looking for and help yourself to understand them. And there we go. With these new sources, it's able to explain it a lot better. Now, everything I've shown you so far is probably only about 5 to 10% of what Gemini Notebook can actually do. The real benefits are going to be over on the right side, where you're able to create some really impressive outputs. Some of them are going to be better for learning, some of them for actually presenting, some of them are shareable. But one thing I want to point out is, let's say you're planning a vacation. Say, maybe I'm going to make a new notebook and we're going to say travel to Costa Rica. And maybe I want this to be planned with my wife. I can click on the share button up on the top right. And anyone who has a Google account, if you're sharing, for example, on like Google Drive or something like that, rather than making a folder, you can do everything in Gemini Notebook. So I can just add the email right here that I want to share with. I can choose the access. So it could be anyone with the link. It could be public. It could be just the people I actually share with. I can choose if they're going to be a viewer, an editor, or if I just want to remove them. So I can say editor, and then I can send it. Now, this one wasn't named yet, so I have to import my sources and it'll automatically name it. So I'll view these sources. These all look pretty good to me. I'll say import. And of course, you can import more sources as well. Have as many sources as you want. All right, so I've got a bunch of sources on the left. Let's start actually going through what you can really make on the right side. Let's start off with audio overview, see what that's all about. So you're able to choose the language. You're able to choose the duration of this, short, default, or long. And you can choose which sources are actually going to be used. So maybe I don't really want the safety ones, but I do want like the health ones maybe. I don't know. I can go through this and confirm which ones I want. And down here, we can choose what this little AI host, like I said, it's basically going to be like kind of a podcast. You can choose what they're actually going to focus on. So I'm going to say right now, you are an expert and you're helping someone plan their very first trip. We can also choose, by the way, if this is going to be brief, if it's going to be a deep dive, if it's going to be a critique. So maybe you're giving this an essay that you wrote and you wanted to criticize it, or if you wanted to debate, if you have sources from conflicting ideas and you wanted to kind of discuss both sides. So I'm going to do a brief one for this, just something simple. Maybe I have a commute, I drive, 20 minutes or something, and I want to listen to this on my drive and get some ideas. And it's a good way to kind of digest a bunch of sources that you have that you found online. Now, by the way, you don't just have to add sources from the web. Like I said, if you click on add sources, you can upload files, you can add websites. So if you find YouTube videos, you can copy and paste the links and then hit shift enter and add a new one. So new link there, new link there. And so you can add, multiple URLs at once. And of course, you can add copied text. So if you just copy and paste something, you click on this and you can paste it in right there. Now, while that's loading, I want to show you something really important. If you click on this little button right here, configure notebook, you have some fundamental settings, really only 2 settings to be honest. One is going to be more of the style of the conversation you have with it. So default works fine, but if you're trying to study, which as I've kind of been saying, Gemini Notebook does a really good job of, you could set it to learning guide, or you could set it to custom and tell it, all right, you are responding at like a PhD student level, great example, or something really like entry level. There's kind of different things you can do here that can really tailor how it's responding to you. I'll leave it on default for now, and you can also choose the response length. I personally like shorter responses. I clicked on longer. Shorter responses, very concise. I'll save that. We can also customize this little banner on the top. If you click on customize, you can upload an image. If you're the kind of person that organizes your notes and likes to have like nice little headers on them, you can absolutely do that up here. I'm going to not do that, but you can also set a custom summary if you wanted to instead of that AI generated one at the top. I think it's fine though. I don't really ever use that, honestly. All right, so we now have our little audio overview. I'm gonna hit play and hopefully you can hear this.
This is the brief on planning your first trip to Costa Rica. It's Central America's most rewarding destination, offering an unbeatable mix of jungles, volcanoes, means navigating some vastly different terrains. So second, think really hard about transportation. Renting a car gives you freedom, sure, but it brings hidden costs like mandatory local liability insurance, adding $15 to $25 a day. Plus, you'll dodge deep potholes and unpainted speed bumps.
Okay, so definitely a little bit less like directly to the point and a little bit more like fluff conversational, but it is still pretty useful. 1 minute 41 seconds is brief. Like I said, I chose the brief one, so that makes sense. Now let's do a slide deck. And for the slide deck, I want this to be maybe convincing people to go with me. And you could choose either a detailed deck, which is, full text and details, or something that's going to be more key talking points like a presenter slide. I'm going to go with the detailed deck and generate this. So the slide deck's ready. If I click on it, it'll show me kind of in the right side, like what it looks like in small. But of course, you can share this, you can expand the viewer, or you could just, hit present right now and start the slideshow. And I think it actually did a pretty good job generating this. This looks like very unique. It doesn't seem, I thought it'd be much more basic when I first tried this. And some things, it's not always going to be perfect, but for the most part, I think this did a good job. I asked it to specifically focus on, wildlife that's there, things you can do, safety, water quality, food, and things like that. So wildlife, they're showing us like, sloths, monkeys, some different birds, the overall, canopy, the height, how much it's going to cost to do different things. So scuba diving is like $100 to $150, whereas you can go on a little zip line for $50 to $90. Kind of cool. You see the different options you have. And it is presented in a way, like I said, I asked it to make a presentation that I could show my family to convince them to go on the trip with me. Also, you can see right here, there are, tourist traps, there's Western style cafe meals, or you can go to a local soda. I actually looked that up before, and that is something people talk about quite a bit as, a more traditional and more affordable way to eat meals. You can see water quality, you can see, it looks like kind of a duplicate slide there, or at least the same diagram for both. So not perfect, but again, pretty cool that you're able to make this. And there are actually quite a few slides on that as well. So going back to that engineering one that I had with the 2 textbooks uploaded, let's say we wanted to make a quiz. If you click on quiz, you can choose the difficulty of it. You can choose how many questions you have. Again, you can choose the sources, and you can ask it for a specific type of quiz. Now I already did that, and you can see the quiz right here. If I click on it, opens up on the right side, and you're able to go through one question at a time. They also have hints down here. So, checking these out. If you click on one, it'll tell you it's not right. It tells you the right answer, and it tells you why it is the right answer. You can go through, it tells me there are 26 questions, and you can just keep generating these quizzes. So again, helps you study or helps you better understand a certain subject. Besides quizzes, again, I'm going to go through all of these because there are a lot of really interesting things you can do. Another one would, of course, be flashcards to help you study. Similar thing there. You can choose how many you have and the difficulty, and you can give it, what kind of style you want for that. And I also made one of these already. And you can see right here, the flashcards, there are 80 of them. And so for each one, it'll just ask me a question. I can, flip it over. I can actually see answer right there. I can explain the answer, which is pretty useful right there. I can ask. And I could say, yes, I got it right, or no, I didn't. And it's going to help me later to study that if I wanted to. And remember before I said you could add notes to things. So if you really like this one, you could save it to a note. Notes show up over on the right side, as I showed you before. So you can open them up and kind of revisit a specific thing. This could be really helpful for, questions you might have gotten wrong on homeworks and things like that. Now let's make one more notebook. And this time I want to look at Amazon's earnings. Maybe you're just going to kind of digest a big earnings report or something like that. I'm going to upload this, and we can have it make infographics. We can have it make data tables. We can have it make reports, different ways to kind of digest that and better understand the data it's presenting us. Now for this Amazon earnings report, I'm going to make a report, first of all, based on that. And you can make it as a blog post. You can make it as a briefing doc or whatever. Let's say we're going to make a briefing doc. This, of course, is going to be English. While that's working, I'm also going to set up a data table and an infographic. The infographic's a new thing, so it is still in beta, much like the slide decks. We're going to get a lot more kind of images, and this is the kind of cool thing that could be useful for you, but I've seen a lot of people kind of repost this format on Instagram or other social media platforms, and they tend to actually perform pretty well. So I'm going to make this one in portrait, so it's more of a social media aspect ratio. You can choose the visual style, so if you want it to be more editorial, instructional, actually there are quite a few different ones. I'm going to go with professional here. Actually, scientific. I think that's going to be kind of cool. I want lots of detail on this, and I'm going to say, actually, I'm not going to say anything there. I'm just going to say generate and see what it comes up with. And the third one I want to do with this example is a data table. And for the data table, I'm going to say generate. Okay, so the briefing doc is now complete. That's the most boring of the three. So clicking on that, you can see it looks a lot like a regular output that we would get, but it's kind of formatted a little longer, and you can copy and paste this. You could use this as a blog post, for example, or you could use it as like a memo. I don't know, something like that. It's kind of a good, it's a good starting point right there. And of course, we have the other two now done. We've got the infographic and the table. Table's not going to be as interesting. We'll start with that one. The table, you can see, I mean, I don't love the format of this. I'm going to expand the viewer. There we go. That actually looks a lot better now. And I mean, it kind of makes sense. They just highlighted the key ones out of here. Let me show you the actual earnings. You can see that's what the table looked like. They highlighted the biggest changes there. Of course, they show the source as well. And if you close this, you can always, by the way, check out the source on the left side, and it'll kind of open up the source for you in a little tiny view right there. And you can slide this back and forth to see, to make it slightly larger or smaller. And of course, we have the infographic. So let's close that, make it look a little cleaner. Let's open up the infographic, and there we go. So infographic, let's zoom in and see what they showed us. They focused on the data quite a bit. And this is the kind of thing that, again, I see all the time on social media. People are reposting this stuff on Instagram and X. And so they're showing us like North America, AWS, international, revenue mix. Of course, I'm always skeptical of these infographics that AI generates. You can always kind of tell when it's AI generated, and sometimes they do hallucinate. But for the most part, I think this did a pretty impressive job of how it actually laid it out and pulled data from the sources specifically. So it wasn't again making these up. That's, as I keep saying, the main benefit of Gemini Notebook. Now, let's go check out the other two examples you could do. So at the top, I kind of skipped over these originally. We have a mind map, and if you're making a mind map, you basically just tell it what you want. You don't have a ton of settings with that one, but you could say like only look at one source. You could ask it to focus on key concepts in like, whatever, physics or, engineering vibrations, as I talked about before. You can make a mind map to help you study. I had it make a mind map for traveling. So let's see what that looks like. You can see the mind map is interactive, which is really cool. And you can kind of dig into each one. Let's expand this viewer. Hopefully it's not too small on that screen recording. Let me zoom in a little bit on this. There we go. So it shows me the different regions, and within each region, I can dig a little deeper into maybe San Jose and Central Valley. And when I do that, it shows me some different ideas of what I could do. Museum visits, you can, go to a rescue center, coffee plantation tour. If I click on that, it just kind of opens up the chat and goes to discuss, organic coffee plantation tour. And you can dig a little deeper, but it's going to be over in chat. So it's not the deepest mind map, but I do kind of appreciate the way that's set up. And with all of these outputs, we can always give feedback, good content, bad content. So I could say good content, fine, and you can provide feedback. That's not really doing a lot for you. That's more so for Google. So let's close this one. And as you'd expect, the output in the middle tells us all about what we wanted. That's very common for AI chat. I think a lot of people understand that. And of course, the last one is going to be video overview. If you click on video overview, this one I think is the most advanced and the most interesting in my opinion. You can choose, of course, the sources, the language, explainer, so landscape or a short. A short is going to be something that would be more, shorts, Reels, Instagram, Facebook Reels, YouTube Shorts, stuff like that, TikTok style. And that one's a little more limited, whereas if you go to explainer, you can choose if you want custom, classic, whiteboard style. Actually, that's pretty cool. You can do that. You can choose from a lot of different styles on how this little video is going to be made, and you can choose what the focus is going to be on. So I'm going to do a short one right now, just see how it works. It might take a little bit less time, of course, to generate, and we'll see what it makes. So checking out that video, if I click on it, it's 1 minute and 18 seconds.
Building the perfect 1-week Costa Rica itinerary means balancing.
Hold on, that totally sounds like a credit card commercial, but let me bring it full screen so we can see it again.
Epic adventures with smart local hacks. First up, head to La Fortuna for the Arenal volcano and natural hot springs.
Okay, so it looks like it's just like images kind of in a slideshow with audio on top of that and just some captions there. So I don't know, it makes sense. It's not going to be making a full, 1.5 minute video all animated, but it's impressive. I think it could be better. Probably will be better in a year or so. So as you can see through those examples, Gemini Notebook is really meaningfully different from Gemini as a chat or, ChatGPT or Claude, because you're able to, for one, really restrict the sources and where the information is coming from. You can find the sources on web. You can upload your own files. You could use links to videos, and it's able to transcribe videos on YouTube. And then not only are you able to ask questions about that and really customize and save your notes and organize things on the right side, but you can also create, various different outputs, audio overviews, more study style things. You can interpret data and organize it in ways that are easier to understand and parse different data from really large, hundreds of pages on a PDF. And for those reasons, in my opinion, Gemini Notebook is a really valuable tool. But let me know in the comments down below, what would you use Gemini Notebook for? Thanks for watching. I'm Michael Bryan with Santrel Media, and I have a lot of other videos about AI. If you're interested, be sure to subscribe to this channel and check out these videos next.